What if I told you China is going to be the real winner of the Iran war? Let's understand how by looking at Trump's ongoing visit to China. President Trump has landed in Beijing for a very high profile summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is Trump's first visit to China after his 2017 visit during his first presidency. And right now, Trump is desperate for China's help to bring the Iran war to an end. And this is where the advantage lies for China. So, in this short session, let's understand China's role in helping the United States to bring the Iran war to an end and how this could benefit China geopolitically. Let's also talk about the three T's that define the ongoing summit. The contemporary US China relations are said to be defined by three T's: T for Taiwan, T for trade, and T for technology. These three issues have taken the center stage at the ongoing Trump Z summit, along with US requiring Chinese assistance to try and influence Iran to bring this war to an end. So let's break this down one by one, starting with the Taiwan issue. As soon as Trump landed in China, Xi Jinping has directly reminded the president to not meddle and interfere with the Taiwan issue. China has given out a stark warning that any continued American interference could potentially trigger a conflict over the Taiwan issue. This issue goes all the way back to 1949 when the PRC was established, with the Communist Party of China winning the Civil War. The Communist Party had defeated the Kuomintangs that ruled over Republic of China, and the Kuomintangs were cornered into the small island of Taiwan. So since then, PRC has claimed to be the legitimate and the sole authority in government and claims sovereignty over Taiwan and hopes that someday Taiwan will be integrated with the rest of China. Now, the United States, like most other countries, they have accepted the one China principle and policy, meaning they accept that there's only one Chinese territory and there's only one Chinese state, that is the PRC. So the United States, like most other countries, including India, it does not have official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. But of late, the US has stepped up its engagement with Taiwan through unofficial and as well as through non diplomatic routes. The US has been supplying arms and weapons and, in a way, instigating Taiwan over the Taiwan Strait and using its military presence in the region to deploy its navy and sometimes air force as well through the Taiwan Strait to try and instigate China. So, this strategy of the US to use Taiwan as a pawn against China is something which China has never appreciated. And China has often reacted quite aggressively. And Xi Jinping is using this opportunity to extract some guarantees and commitments from the US that if Trump needs China's help to end the Iran war, one condition is that the US will have to back off from the Taiwan issue. The Xi Jinping administration has made it very clear that in the coming days, they might seek the complete integration of Taiwan. This has been the long stated aim of the Communist Party. So China sees any external presence, be it the US or its allies, who come to the aid and assistance of Taiwan as a strategic and security threat. And China has said it would go to any extent to defend against these threats. So Xi Jinping has warned Trump that the Taiwan issue could become a potential conflict point between US and China as well. So this is one commitment that China would expect in return for a quid pro quo arrangement where China could probably help Trump to exit from Iran war. The other major issue is trade. See, after Trump assumed office, he resumed his trade war, which he had started during his first presidency, where he had levied heavy tariffs on China's exports to the US. So in the last 1.5 years, US administration has targeted China's exports with heavy tariffs, even ranging up to 150%. But last year at the APEC summit in Busan in South Korea, Trump and Xi Jinping met and they hit the pause button, often referred to as the Busan Truce, and they agreed to tone down the tariffs. The US consequently has brought down the tariffs against Chinese goods in the range of 10% to 45%. Right now, China would be expecting some guarantees with regard to lower tariffs from the US, so that Chinese goods and exports can ensure that they retain the market in the United States. On the other hand, the United States would be pushing for China to procure more agricultural commodities from United States. Because last year when Trump levied these unreasonable, illogical tariffs ranging up to 150%, China used its key weapon, its key leverage, which was to punish Trump by hitting his core vote bank in rural America. By hitting US agrarian exports, China decided to take a stall or basically stop the procurement of soybean. And the soybean farmers and the rural belt of US constitutes a core vote bank for the MAGA crowd and for Trump's politics. And that is exactly where China hit, right at the nerve center. Following this, the US agreed for a truce to lower the tariffs and rationalize it. And China had agreed to resume agricultural imports. Because China is one of the world's largest consumer of soybean and US is one of the largest producer and exporter. So this ensures that the money keeps flowing from China towards rural America into the hands of American farmers who constitute the core vote bank of Donald Trump. Then the other concern of Donald Trump would be to extract commitments from China to stop providing the intermediaries that are used in drug production in Latin America, primarily fentanyl. Fentanyl is one of the chemical precursors used in Colombia, Mexico by various drug cartels to manufacture synthetic drugs and pump that into the US market. And as you know, for the Trump administration, fighting narcotics has been a key agenda, a key policy issue. And Trump would be looking for guarantees and commitments with regard to fentanyl supplies. Then coming to the final T, technology. During the last year's trade war, both sides have leveraged their technological advantage to try and cripple the strategic industries of the other side. For example, the US placed curbs on exports of key chips, semiconductor chips, and GPUs in particular, the graphic processing units, which are the backbone of your AI data centers, especially companies like Nvidia and others, which are US based companies. They play a dominating role in the world of GPUs. And China needs access to GPUs and semiconductor chips to dominate the AI domain. And US placed restrictions on this. It placed export controls on access to GPUs for China. So China would seek some relaxations over here, whereas US would seek access to critical mineral supply chains that are largely dominated and controlled by China, particularly lithium and other key rare earth elements, which find a big application in electronics industry, in semiconductors, in AI, in defense, in aerospace. So this would be a quid pro quo arrangement that China would expect. China would expect US to deliver on the three T's, and US would also expect China to deliver on these promises. But however, the core issue here would be the Iran conflict. Can China be in that advantageous position to convince Iran and seek more extraction and commitment from the US side? Because, see, history tells us that there is a possibility that China could actually benefit and take advantage of the situation. This happened once back in 1970s when US, which was stuck in the war of attrition in Vietnam, relied on Chinese support to end the Vietnam War and exit from Vietnam. Because during the conflict, US had no relations with the PRC in 1950s and 60s. The US had never recognized the PRC. It had maintained its engagement only with Republic of China. But President Nixon realized that without Chinese support, they couldn't weaken the communists and they couldn't seek an exit from Vietnam. Eventually, Nixon reached out to China via Pakistan as a mediator. And again, you see a similar scenario where Pakistan is in between US and Iran in the current ongoing conflict. So Pakistan created an opening for US and Nixon carried out a high profile visit, very similar to how Trump is visiting China now, and worked out an arrangement which helped China to be convinced by the US to pull back its support for the communists in Vietnam, which paved the way for US to withdraw its troops. And this recognition that China received, US established formal ties with PRC and ensured that PRC got its permanent seat at UNSC and Taiwan was basically thrown under the bus. And US committed to accept one China principle to not have relations, official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. And this helped in rising the global profile of PRC and it funneled and promoted the global rise and the geostrategic rise of China. So essentially, this event of 1970s was a launchpad for China. Now, experts believe the same thing might happen with the Iran war. Right now, US China, which are locked in this conflict, a Cold War rivalry of sorts, China could leverage the conflict with Iran and use its position to try and convince Iran. because Iran has taken a maximalist position. Iran is unlikely to budge to American demands. Both US and Israel realize that there are limitations to their military strategy. No matter what military destruction they have carried out, no matter how much infrastructure they have destroyed or military targets they have destroyed, eventually they realize that Iran has a chokehold on the Hormuz Strait. Iran has leveraged its geography to its advantage. And now Iran is demanding maximalist commitments. It doesn't want any compromise on nuclear enrichment. It doesn't want to hand over the nuclear stockpile. And it wants guarantees regarding any further attacks from US and Israel. And it wants to seek war reparations from the US and also exercise control over Hormuz to levy some tolls. Now, this is unacceptable to the Trump administration. And officially, the Trump administration cannot continue the war. They can't drag it because of the War Act, which places a 60-day limit for a war authorized by the president. Beyond 60 days, they need congressional approval. And most likely, the US Congress is unlikely to approve the continuation of this war. So essentially, Trump has hit a stalemate, a dead end, probably realizing that mistakes have been made. And now he's desperate to seek an exit, off ramp. And only China can probably provide that because China is the economic lifeline for Iran. Iran's 80% of its oil exports are bought by China. And look at the non oil trade as well. Iran buys a lot of military equipment, electronic components that are used in Iran's missiles and drones, and they all come from China. And that is the key advantage and leverage China has over Iran. China is also a big investor in the Belt and Road Initiative, where Iran benefits. So Iran could be probably influenced by China, and it explains why Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi visited China just a few days before Trump's visit to China. And also, don't forget, Pakistan, the mediator, is an all weather friend of China and it keeps China well informed about the ongoing peace talks. So, China is in that advantageous position, that perfect position where it can influence Iran to help Trump seek an exit. And in process, it can extract the commitment from US on Taiwan issue, on trade and technology, thus giving itself a big upper hand. And this could probably mark the decline of US and the further rise of China. Especially in West Asian geopolitics, the Gulf monarchies had always seen US as the guarantor of their security since 1970s. That explains why US had set up so many military bases as well. Now, with Iran taking direct hits at American bases and US almost taking a back step in this conflict right now, it almost will be seen as a decline of US influence and military power. A vacuum which would be created in the Gulf would be easily occupied by China, further promoting China's rise as a global power. So, what do you think about this? Let me know in the comments and please take up this practice prelims question and let me know the correct answer in the comment section. And don't worry, we will follow the summit. Once the summit is over, the key outcomes, we will discuss that in a separate video. Thanks for watching.